This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Evan Jansen. This show is very much live and it's broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now with the entire show available on demand on our YouTube channel. Now today, in honour of the life of Member of Parliament Mario Ambrosini, we put the debate around the legalization of marijuana back on the table. We look at the effects of the downgrading of Capitec Bank in South Africa. More earthquakes are expected on the Gold Belt. We'll delve into that a little bit later, and we'll get an update on Ebola from Kenya. First, though, Katrine Milan with today's news.
Well, hello and welcome. I'm Katrine Milan, and let's take a look at the news making headlines this morning. The search is expected to continue for people who are believed to be buried under the rubble after a house that was being renovated collapsed in Alberton, south of Johannesburg. The death toll has been revised from 9 to 7, with several others injured. A construction team was renovating the double-storey house when it caved in yesterday.
We had two contractors on site. So one contractor had about 24 people on site, but the other one we cannot account as to how many. So we are looking for that. We are still searching for that information. We don't know how many people were actually on site and how many are still missing. So, but we want to make sure that now we leave no stone unturned.
The family of Inkatha Free Aid Party MP Mario Oran Ambrosini says he made the conscious decision to end his long battle with cancer at the weekend. The family issued a statement saying Ambrosini was in the last stages of terminal lung cancer and decided to end his long battle of suffering. He died at his home in Cape Town on Saturday. He was 53 years old. Parliament's Oversight Committee on Home Affairs is meeting today to discuss how it will deal with the fate of the chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission, Pansy Tlakula. It follows her failed bid to overturn the Electoral Court's ruling that she is guilty of acting improperly in procuring the IEC's head offices in Pretoria. Then moving to Africa, Southern African leaders ended a 2-day summit at Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, resolving to develop their industries to boost regional cooperation and set up a fund for its projects. The heads of state from the Southern African Development Community say industrialization must take center stage on the regional integration agenda. Then in the US, police fired tear gas at protesters in Ferguson as violence erupted again over the fatal shooting of an unarmed black teenager, Michael Brown, by a local policeman. Officers in riot gear, supported by an armoured SWAT vehicle, repeatedly ordered the crowd to disperse. Brown's death has sparked daily protests and nightly clashes with police. US President Barack Obama yesterday again called for calm.
While I understand the passions and the anger that arise over the death of Michael Brown, giving into that anger by looting or carrying guns and even attacking the police only serves to raise tensions and stir chaos.
Remember, all those top stories are available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katrina. Now, this weekend, IFP Member of Parliament Mario Oran Ambrosini, who recently tabled legislation to decriminalise the medical use of cannabis, sadly lost his fight against stage 4 lung cancer. Now, with Ambrosini's bill still being reviewed, we put this debate back on the table today. Should marijuana be legalised in South Africa or not? And if the bill does get passed, what will the benefits and or disadvantages of this be? We're joined today by two organisations who are for and against the legalisation of the drug. But before we talk to both parties, let's remember Mario Ambrosini's impassioned parliamentary plea to President Jacob Zuma, asking him to decriminalise the medical use of marijuana.
We need to focus our government attention to develop new strategies to deal with cancer. There are treatments for cancer. we have made them illegal. We have created in this country, as in other countries, a legal framework in which only that which has been proven with private money to be effective and safe can be administered to patients.
Well, we are joined now by Mamazane Mapanga from the Concerned Young People of South Africa and William Wallace from Below the Line, the lobby group, to talk about the issue. Good morning, and thank you for joining us, guys.
Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting us as well.
Good morning,
Mamazane, you guys are totally against the legalization of it, even for medical use.
Sure.
We spoke to Below the Line and some lawyers about the processes and so forth some weeks back. You say you don't agree.
Yes.
Why not?
We totally disagree because as an organization, we are dealing with young people that we see day in and day out suffering from dagga. They are university dropouts. They are school dropouts. They've even lost their jobs because of the outcome of what dagga has brought about in their lives. Many of them come with different, for example, diseases. Like if you can come now to our center, they become disabled. They lose their minds. They can't even use their logics anymore. Their future is ruined because of marijuana, because of dagga. They can't even think at school. Even if we try to take them to schools, they can't even think. They can't even study. Basically, they've lost everything because dagga has affected them.
William, you guys are obviously taking the opposite view. What are your views on what Mamazane just said?
I think that we need to first and foremost keep in mind that the symptoms of dagga as we know it today are a result of prohibition. We're not sitting in an environment locally where we see legalization. We know that in countries that have legalized or decriminalized, such as Portugal, Switzerland, and the Netherlands, we have rates that are almost half that of countries such as the US. And I think in all fairness, if we are going to start simply blaming everyone's faults and vices on dagga, we then also need to accredit their successes. The last 3 presidents of the US of America all used cannabis recreationally. Even Barack Obama, in his memoirs, has very specifically categorized how significant it was to him as a youth and how well known he was for smoking cannabis. So we know that, yes, there are situations where dagga may not agree with people, but I think we draw with very broad brushstrokes when we start saying it disables people, it drives them out of school. I think we should be looking at socio-economic reasons for the outcomes that lead to these situations, as well as dagga use by the youth.
You were saying a little bit earlier that people become disabled and they drop out of school. And so what's the methodology that you're using when you say this?
I'm using it because, sir, he can say whatever he wants to say. But as I've said, we have helped about 2,000 young people. They've got this problem. So no matter what he's trying...
Is it only dagga, marijuana?
It is dagga. Dagga. So that is why, as an organization, no matter what other people want to say, but we as young people of South Africa, we don't want dagga whatsoever. We want to better our future. And using dagga is not there to make us better people.
Let's talk about the case. We can talk about sugar. We can talk about a whole lot of other stuff that have even worse effects on humanity. I want to ask you about, in this specific case, when we talk about Mr. Mario Ambrosini, the Member of Parliament.
Yes.
Do you really think the drug should not be made available to those suffering from cancer and other illnesses?
It should not. My mom is suffering from cervical cancer. Dagga didn't help her, but the chemotherapy, that's what helped her.
Did she try the dagga?
She did try, but it didn't help.
What do you say to that, William?
I think that's a fair comment. No one is saying that dagga is a silver bullet, that it will cure all ailments. Yeah. What we have seen is we have seen promising lab results with rats and that, where we have seen reductions in cancer tumour growth. And also, it's a question of application of the dagga. What are the properties we want to isolate and apply? But certainly it is by no means a silver bullet, and no one is saying that. What we are merely saying is that when you are in that situation, you should be afforded the opportunity to make those life decisions yourself. And we know that there are medicinal properties for dagga. We've seen pharmaceutical products that are now registered in the UK, and we know that the US government itself holds a patent on medical marijuana, not a synthetic form of it, the physical plant itself.
In the end, Mamazana,
Yes.
we're talking about a plant that grows naturally, not about a chemical
Yes.
that's created by man.
Yes, I understand.
Also, if you look at the trials that have gone around the world,
Yes.
it's legal in quite a few states in the US and so forth. What do you say to that?
You know what? To conclude this, the legalization of dacha is a no to our country. Look at the rate of rape in our country because of people that
But
are
you can't say dacha makes people
that are under
rape
the
them.
influence of dacha. Look at criminality because of the people
No.
that take dacha and then end up committing those crimes.
I don't think,
Finish and clear.
William, I think that would be a very uninformed view if you say that dacha causes people to rape and people to be involved in crime.
Sir,
I would rather say that alcohol that's freely available out there makes people much more aggressive than
I'm
dacha.
talking from experience.
In what experience then?
I've got so many boys, as I've said.
No, that's a generalization.
It's fine.
What experience?
It's fine. About 2,000 of them that have been
One
involved.
specific case.
That have been involved with dacha. They come to us and testify that because of dacha, this and this is what I've done. Those people have been involved in the worst criminal
But
cases.
surely you can't
Why?
blame. Surely you can't blame.
It is
you
a
can't
drug.
blame. It's a drug, but so is sugar. Sugar is a drug. More people on the planet today are addicted to sugar and kills more people.
Sugar is more healthier, but dacha is a no. It should
William,
not
your
be
response.
legalized.
William, your response.
I
Please.
think Ms. Mapanga is very much a symptom of the problem of prohibition as well. Yes, we need to have a sensible discussion regarding the legalization of dacha. We need to face this inevitability. But when people are on opposite ends of the table throwing big stones and serious allegations like this, it does not help your discussion. We want to engage with you. We want the same thing. We want to lower youth use. But we do not believe that it is helping the youth by simply arresting them and throwing them in jail. Remember, it is not cannabis that is criminalized. It is the use of cannabis. And we are criminalizing people. When someone comes to you, when a young man comes to you and says, I'm having a problem with dacha, do you send him to jail?
We don't send them to
Then you
jail.
already concede that you agree that prohibition is not the answer, Ms.
Because
Mapanga.
our aim is to help them.
As is ours.
It is you helping them by giving them dacha.
No, by not throwing them in prison. By not throwing them in
This is what
prison.
I want to tell you. There's so many women in Durban that are crying tears because from these children that are using dacha, they've sold everything, every furniture in their houses,
I think you're talking
including
about
beds.
if we can come back to order.
Yes.
I don't think that it's proven, in fact, that dacha makes people aggressive.
It is proven.
It's
Come
actually
to
the
our
opposite.
Center.
It's actually
Come
the opposite.
to my center.
What
it
about
has maybe
alcohol?
helped you.
What are your views on alcohol?
Same. It's the same. Dacha and alcohol is
So
the
you
same.
want dacha banned, alcohol banned?
Both.
What about sugar? It kills more people than dacha.
Sugar is healthier. Take coffee without sugar and you tell me what is the taste.
No, but sugar kills more people than dacha.
It doesn't matter. But the fact that dacha is a drug, I'm saying capital N-O, it must never
What
be legalized.
about the benefits? It's such a useful plant.
There are no benefits.
There
are no benefits.
You're getting a little bit irate, my dear.
Ms.
Let's
Mapanga,
talk about the benefits, and then you respond to those benefits.
I think let's begin with the one-word solution, Google. I think we cannot simply claim ignorance in the 21st century. We are well aware that there are industrial benefits, medical benefits. We know that the very foundations of our country are built on cannabis. The very sails that brought civilization across the country were made from cannabis. We know that people have been using cannabis medicinally for many years. And I also get the feeling that you're not even familiar with the history of why cannabis was prohibited. It was prohibited firstly and mostly on racial grounds, both in South Africa and in America. If we look at it, we know that it is a non-toxic plant, it's impossible to overdose, and you also make the assumption that I am not aware of the harms of marijuana or drugs as a whole. I was raised by parents who are addicts. No, give me a chance, you've had a nice rant. I have been raised by parents who are both addicts of everything from tobacco and alcohol to crack and buttons, as you would know as mandrax. And I promise you, the first thing that was pawned from our house was for alcohol. Each and every time. But I cannot see how you can propose that we continue to assist the youth of South Africa by imprisoning them. Yes, we do not want young people to use cannabis, but then let us look at first world models where there is evidence, such as Portugal, who for 10 years have decriminalized all drugs, not just dagga, such as the Netherlands with their quasi-legal system, and Switzerland. We have seen reductions to nearly half of that of the youth in these countries, as we do in America with its multi-billion rand annual budget on fighting dagga.
There we have a map on screen now of where it is legal at the moment. About half the world in different stages. The surprising one, North Korea, it's completely legal for all kinds of use in North Korea. But I wanted to come back to you, Mamazane. You're very passionate about this, and almost to the extent where you get a little bit angry, and that's acceptable. But what do you say in response to what William just told you? Is it not time for us to take a much more open-minded view around the subject?
You know, really, I totally disagree till the end. Because how are you going to control this? Just give me a chance. Because if you cannot control it now, and the people's
But how do we
future...
control alcohol? We control it very well at the moment. And once you decriminalize something, it's much easier to control, because at the moment it's out of control because it is available under the table, as it were. If you legalize it in some ways, as they have in America, you can control it a little bit better.
No. You can't say that you are controlling alcohol, because how many people's lives are being ruined by alcohol?
But you can't be a nanny state where you tell people you're not allowed to have a drink, you're not allowed to smoke cannabis, you're not allowed to do this. In the end,
yes.
You are infringing on people's rights to make those decisions for themselves.
No, it's fine, whatever you say. But as an organization, we stand and there's that saying that as young South Africans, we also want to be CAs one day. We also want to be doctors one day. And I believe that, living a healthy life, abstaining from those drugs, you will get there.
Not everyone has the same dream, and not everybody wants to abstain.
It doesn't matter. That is why I'm here, because I want to tell the young South Africans, just leave it. It won't help you. It won't help you, and it hasn't helped other people. As the CYP of South Africa, we say no to the legalization of dagga. No matter what you study, no matter what you tell me, I say no.
Do you think if you speak to a young South African in this kind of tone, that they would respond positively?
They have responded many times.
William?
I'm going to be frank, Ebius. I think it's absurd that you would close your eyes and ears to the last 100 years of progress made regarding cannabis. I think it's also a case of the blood will be on your hands regarding all those people who get sent to jail. You think that simply throwing people in jail is the solution. We face a fact where there is demand for the product one way or another. In the Western Cape, demand for cannabis amongst the youth has exceeded demand for alcohol. Once again, in a framework of prohibition. I know from personal experience it was easier for me at 15 years old to go to the local taxi rank and buy a bankie of grass than it was to try and buy a bottle of brandy from the local bottle store. And we have no control. We have zero control in the framework that we have. No checking for IDs, and we also thereby create a situation where a youngster who perhaps does wish to purchase cannabis is now exposed to a situation with a drug dealer where he has the option of heroin, tick, crack, and so on. So I think you cannot plead willful ignorance in this situation. You need to take responsibility for the fact, and we need to realize that we want the same thing. We want to reduce use amongst the youth, but we see that there are more constructive ways to do this. We spend nearly a billion rand every 2 months on arresting just dagga users in South Africa. That means we are arresting the stoner next door rather than the hijacker in the driveway. I think it is a very tainted hand of help that you offer the youth by threatening them with imprisonment. We need to look at realistic and constructive solutions to this problem rather than close our eyes and ears to them.
But you're welcome to come down to our organization when those young people are troubling you.
We will make that visit, and we will make it happen, as this is a story that we're going to continue with a discussion until the bill is discussed in Parliament. Thank you for joining us today, the concerned young people of South Africa, Mamazane Mapanga and William Wallace from the lobby group Below the Line. Thank you guys for joining us. A very passionate debate here this morning, all, of course, in memory of Mario Oriani Ambrosini. And there are reports that the IFP MP ended his own life According to the reports, the family released a statement saying the politician decided to end his long battle with cancer at the weekend. Oran Ambrosini died at his home in Cape Town in the early hours of Saturday morning at the age of 53. He was in the last stages of terminal lung cancer and decided to end his long battle of suffering. Ambrosini said he had rejected chemotherapy as a treatment option, as it would extend his life expectancy by only a few months and would cause severe side effects. In February, he introduced the Medical Innovation Bill to legalize the use of medical marijuana. He also pleaded with President Jacob Zuma to provide laws that gave doctors the power to prescribe alternative treatments. When asked whether Ambrosini took his own life, the family responded with, he decided to end his suffering. They could not provide any further details. Well, let's take a look at what you are saying on the subject. We asked you yesterday to send in some tweets around this. And that Zim guy says, SABC Newsroom, it helps my mind too, especially when faced with complex maths and physics problems, says that Zim guy. Rufus Mavura says, at SABC Newsroom, marijuana should be prescribed on some illnesses. I know asthma patients over 50 do well with marijuana, says Rufaz. Beatrice Mahonga says, marijuana is dangerous, people. People will abuse it like alcohol. Too much cannabis causes schizophrenia. Please don't get there. Too much of anything is bad for you, I say. Joe Skuman says, keep students out of jail, create a thriving industry, and make alcohol consumption go down. Legalize it at SABC Newsroom, says Jay Skuman. Now, those are your views around this issue. We'll continue a discussion in the weeks and months to come, and we'll keep it alive until it goes to Parliament. Let's take a look now at the front pages from around the world. The International New York Times reporting on the situation in Ferguson, Missouri. This after Michael Brown, an unarmed black teenager, was shot and killed last week by a local policeman. The incident has since sparked protests and riots in the streets of the city. Then the Times in the United Kingdom is reporting on an interesting revelation. Turns out that nearly half of family doctors admit to prescribing antibiotics purely to get pushy patients out of their surgeries. Time for us to take a short commercial break. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News.
Jessica the hippo was found after she was washed down the river shortly after birth. Today, she is a large hippo and still returns for feeding and human interaction.
She also loves body exfoliating. Yes, she has a mask as well.
Jessica is the world's most famous hippo, and perhaps she's the only one who has forgotten how aggressive she's supposed to be.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Malibongwe igama lamakhosikazi.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. International credit rating agency Moody's has downgraded Capitec Bank by 2 notches in the latest development in South Africa. The Banking Association locally says the ratings agency has overreacted by downrating the local bank Capitec. Moody's cited concerns about Capitec's exposure to risky consumer lending as a reason for this downgrade. Capitec has called its 2-notch downgrade unfair and the rationale behind it unfounded. The cuts come after South Africa's central bank launched a $1.6 billion bailout of unsecured lender African Bank Investments this month, which was toppled by surging bad debts among its core market of low-income borrowers. Well, we are joined in the studio today by the head of research at Imara SP Reid, Mr. Stephen Meintjes, to talk about this. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The latest 2 developments, before we talk about the mechanics of it, what are the implications?
Well, I think the implications are that it highlights, funnily enough, I think it highlights the soundness of the South African banking system as a whole. We've got the big 4 commercial banks, we've got Investec, and we've got Capitec in the unsecured lending field with a completely different model to that of Able, much more conservative.
Fairness towards Capitec has been under the spotlight, and in a way they say that the ratings agencies reacted because of African banks' problems, for lack of a better word. What are your views? Was this fair?
I think the rating agency is quite entitled to come to its own conclusions. They look at a lot of banks in a lot of countries. I think it's a pity they didn't come down from their base in Cyprus to have a look at Capitec's books. I think they would have found them very, very different to those of Able.
Now, I wanted to ask you about Capitec's business model in the unsecured lending space. How much different can it then be from an African bank scenario?
Well, for one, the funding is very different. They fund themselves to quite a large extent from their own depositors, retail depositors, and they have a very high capital adequacy rate. In other words, their own equity is very strong. And then, of course, to some extent, they rely on funders, wholesale funders, which is, in the case of Able, that was basically the sole source of funding.
And what would the downgrade from a D+ to a D, what would it mean in practice to Capitec Bank?
Well, certainly share price-wise, the market wasn't particularly perturbed. It could mean that when they go back to the market for more funding, they might have to pay a little bit more. Fortunately for them, they do not have to go in the near future, so that's not an immediate problem.
Now, Capitec Bank, they've done very well. They've lost 5%, I think, off their share price. How do you expect them to come back from that?
Well, they're going to issue a trading update in, I think, around about the 9th or 10th of September, and then their full results a week or 2 after that. And I think that should put paid to any doubts as to how things are going.
If I was a consumer with investments in these 2 entities, or specifically in Capitec at this point, what should I be doing to protect my investment?
Well, you talk about a consumer and an investor. They're 2 different things. The consumer is usually the chap who borrows from Capitec or Able. I think they are duty-bound to continue their repayments. I don't think that changes anything. As far as investors are concerned, I think they can wait for the next update from the company.
Has this spread some sort of panic throughout the banking system in South Africa? And if that is the case, how do you see it play out?
I don't think it's spread any panic whatsoever. I think, if anything, it's, as I said earlier, it's highlighted the stability of the system. But I think what is very important to highlight that what we're talking about here is consumer lending. And these 2 banks, Able was also supposed only to lend to people with jobs. Yeah. So it's lending for consumption. What we really need is a bank for the poor who would be producers, as we have in Bangladesh with the Grameen Bank, that gives microloans to people, whether it's money for a wheelbarrow or a sewing machine, and they are helping people get into production. So that's really what we need in this country.
We've got a small business minister now that's been Is that a route that you see us taking with the new portfolio of small business? And what about the monopolies in South Africa? They seem to suppress small business in a way.
Well, at the level that Grameen Bank operated on, it really was the poor, the unemployed, and the very, very poor. And they got it right in Bangladesh. The challenge is to translate that model into something that's going to work here.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Stephen Mankies, who's the head of research at Imara SP Reed. Thank you once again, sir.
You're welcome.
Well, let's take a quick look at what you're talking about on social media. It's been a buzz this morning. Very, very lively debates we've had earlier on. Fiona says, well fought, Mr. Ambrosini, turning conventional treatments down and living your own life and death. That's the word from Fiona this morning. Witness Moila says, Ambrosini of the IFP shall be remembered through his brave call for Parliament to legalise medical marijuana. May his soul rest in perfect peace. Zetugambo says, can we honestly and sensitively open a discussion on euthanasia as an option if one has a terminal illness? Hashtag Ambrosini. Those are some of your views. We love it. Keep it coming at SABC Newsroom. That's where you can interact with us. That's where we love you to send your contributions. Pictures especially we love because it adds so much to what we do here. Now, scientists have warned South Africans to brace themselves for more earthquakes. They predict that more earthquakes could be experienced in areas with active or disused mines. South Africa has a long history of mining, and among its gold mines are two of the deepest mines in the world. The recent 5.5 magnitude earthquake that hit Klerksdorp in the northwest 2 weeks ago could have been influenced by mining. Experts say more and more deeper mines are adding to stress to the tectonic plates underground, making the ground unstable. The Council of Scientific and Industrial Researcher Mr. Ray Durham and his team of experts have found that more than 90% of seismic events recorded originate in areas where there is gold mining activity. Now, Mr. Durham joins us in studio this morning. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. It's good to be with you.
All of a sudden, it seems that we are at risk of more earthquakes. Is that accurate?
Well, I think it's not all of a sudden. It's a risk that's been here all along. It's just every now and again when a big event like this happens, of course, it catches the public interest and it's on the news. But every day there are tremors that occur in our mines and elsewhere in South Africa.
This kind of scenario, can we look into the future, the glass ball, and see, we might have even bigger earthquakes coming, 7-pointers and so forth? Is that possible?
I think we must distinguish between the earthquakes that happen in the mining areas, and there they are either caused or triggered by the mining activity, and then the natural events, which are just a part of the way in which the earth works. Now, in our mining areas, we really think that the upper limit for these earthquakes are around 5.5, perhaps a little bit bigger. But so we shouldn't really expect a lot bigger earthquakes in the mining areas. But then when it comes just to the natural events, there they could perhaps get as large as magnitude 7, but those earthquakes would not happen perhaps once every 1,000 years. But of course that day could be today. Yeah. We can't say for sure when they will happen, but they would be infrequent.
South Africa has a lot of disused and active mines. What would you like to be seen to be done to deal with the issue or to minimize the effect of future or predicted tremors or earthquakes?
Well, first you've got the effect on the mine workers themselves, and these are people, when they're underground and an earthquake happens close to the mine workings, of course, they're at greatest risk because the roof of the mine can fall down. And their mining engineers have methods to support the roof and to ensure that mining takes place safely. But then, of course, there's the effect on the public, on homeowners and businesses in those areas. And there what we need to do, of course, is to make sure that buildings are constructed in such a way that they can withstand the shaking. And again, there are techniques to do that. There are regulations in place, and what we need to do is to make sure that these are put into practice, that they are enforced.
In your investigation so far, is it a scenario that the deeper mines really have a big effect on the tectonic plates?
Generally, the interaction between our mining activity and I suppose you could say the tectonic forces is quite difficult to distinguish. Now, the East African Rift, of course, runs through Africa and runs through the Great Lakes region, and then the rift seems to branch off into one branch that goes through Mozambique and the other one into Botswana. And here in southern Africa, we've got an area of kind of diffuse seismicity that's affected by the erosion of the continent, by the forces at the mid-ocean ridges, but so it's very hard to pinpoint the activity of these faults. But there would be some degree of interaction, but certainly in the mining areas, the main driver is the voids that have been created over decades of mining.
Now, Klerksdorp, Orkney, these kinds of places on the gold belt, they're used to these kind of tremors, one would think. But do you really see other areas outside of that also being at risk?
Well, certainly as deep mining starts up in the platinum belt, those are the areas around Rustenburg, as the mines go deeper, we're starting to see seismicity taking place. But our research shows that the intensity of the seismic activity in those regions is not the same as in the gold mining areas. The rocks have different properties in those areas. So shakes will be felt, but I'd be very, very surprised if you got earthquakes as big as that in the Rustenburg region.
Finally, mass hysteria a couple of weeks ago when the earthquake happened. We got pictures of some of the shops and, chips falling off a stand and so forth. That was a massive event. Are we as a country as prepared as we could be for these kind of natural disasters? And when I say that, I'm specifically talking about the public out there.
I think this is an area where we need to have better training in schools as to what to do when earthquake shaking starts. And of course, what we mustn't do is panic and run out of doors. We should take cover under our desks, wait for the shaking to end, and then exit in an orderly way. So again, we need to be doing these drills regularly, whether it's a fire drill or an earthquake drill. These things, I believe, should be taught in our classrooms.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's nice to know that we won't get a 9-pointer in South Africa tomorrow. But thank you once again for joining us. That is Mr. Ray Durham, who is with the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's take a look now at what's happening on our Newsroom Facebook page. Today, there you will see that a team of 4 South African health experts are working hard trying to set up a mobile laboratory diagnosing Ebola in Freetown in Sierra Leone. And also, the doctors at Cape Town's Red Cross Children's Hospital say an initiative to reduce the waiting period for certain life-changing surgeries for the young patients is beginning to yield good results. You can find all of those stories and a whole lot more on our Newsroom Facebook page. Now, we go back in time. Today, in 1946, the 42nd President of the United States, Bill Clinton, was born. At the age of 32, Clinton, who had a close relationship with Tata Nelson Mandela, became the youngest governor to be elected in the United States in 4 decades. And in 1992, he won the Democratic nomination for president. Today, we wish you a very happy birthday, Mr. Clinton. As Nelson Mandela called him, my president. You're watching Newsroom. We'll be back after a short break.
We really know the hype is about the new and how about the new cabinet will actually perform. But what role should then the media be playing at this critical stage?
I would hope that the media will give the newly appointed people a benefit of the doubt.
Has the media lost its respect in this regard? We want you to tell us.
The many factors that are hidden from the public in terms of this ought to be brought out by the media.
Watch Media Monitor with me, Alicia Jali, Sundays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News channel.
Zoom into Africa. This is Sierra Leone. The president is Mr. Ernest Bai Koroma. Sierra Leone got independent from the United Kingdom on 27 April in 1961. The population is more than 6 million people. One of the major languages spoken is English. Monetary unit is Leone.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a look at the top stories this morning. The search is expected to continue for people who are believed to be buried under the rubble after a house that was being renovated collapsed in Alberton, south of Johannesburg. The death toll has been revised from 9 to 7, with several others injured. A construction team was renovating the double-storey house when it caved in yesterday. The family of Inkatha Free Aid Party MP Mario Ambrosini says he made the conscious decision to end his long battle with cancer at the weekend. The family issued a statement saying Ambrosini was in the last stages of terminal lung cancer and decided to end his long battle of suffering. He died at his home in Cape Town on Saturday. He was 53 years old. Parliament's Oversight Committee on Home Affairs is meeting today to discuss how it will deal with the fate of the chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission, Patrick Makula. It follows her failed bid to overturn the Electoral Court's ruling that she is guilty of acting improperly in procuring the IEC's head offices in Pretoria. Then in the US, police fired tear gas at protesters in Ferguson as violence erupted again over the fatal shooting of an unarmed black teenager, Michael Brown, by a local policeman. Officers in riot gear, supported by an armoured SWAT vehicle, repeatedly ordered the crowd to disperse. Brown's death has sparked daily protests and nightly clashes with police. US President Barack Obama yesterday again called for calm. Remember, all these top stories are available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Given, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Katrin. Now, the World Health Organization has urged governments not to impose blanket bans on trade and travel on Ebola-affected countries. Kenya has become the latest country to join a growing number of countries and airlines, severing links to the 3 affected West African states. The World Health Body has already said that the risk of Ebola transmission from air travel is very low, but the level of fear is so high that several airlines have disregarded the UN agency's advice. The disease has already killed 1,145 people across West Africa this year alone. Now, for the latest from Kenya, we're joined by the SABC's East Africa correspondent, Sarah Kimani. Very good morning to you, Sarah.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Sarah, just tell us, why did Kenya then go ahead with cutting air travel to Ebola-affected countries?
Well, Kenya Airways says that it is acting on advice from the Ministry of Health officials. Early last week, the Ministry of Health sent 2 people, one to Liberia and one to Sierra Leone, to just check if the tests that were being collected on air travelers were sufficient. And although they did not, in the press conference, say if the response was that it was not sufficient, they said they had decided to cancel the flights on the advice of the Ministry of Health officials.
Now, Sarah, Kenya has been red flagged as one of the high-risk countries for the spread of the disease. What measures are the local government putting in place in your country to curb the spread?
Well, the reason why the World Health Organization during a press conference in Nairobi said that Kenya was at high risk is because every week at least 77 flights will leave the West African nations and land in Nairobi at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. And so what they have done, what the Ministry of Health says it has done, is that it has now 31 people, doctors at the airport, who are conducting screenings for people coming from West Africa, although now the Kenyan government has also closed its borders for people from Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia, where the outbreak of Ebola is. However, they have also constructed an isolation ward at the Kenyatta National Hospital. It has 30 beds and can be able at any given time to take in 30 people. They have trained 100 people who are specialists now on tropical diseases and can be able to deal in case of an outbreak. But they're also saying that they will be training 200 more. So far, that is what we have from the Kenyan government.
Sarah, and quickly tell us about the reaction of the people in Kenya to the spread of the disease. Here in South Africa, we had lots of reports of mass hysteria, even people saying that there was a boat carrying Ebola victims off the coast of South Africa. How's the people in Kenya reacted to the spread?
Initially, the Kenyan government and Kenya Airways was very quiet until the social media started talking and people are complaining, why is Kenya Airways still flying to the country that is the center of the disease? Doctors came up, newspapers started speaking. And from there, I guess Kenya Airways found itself under pressure to work as it did.
Sarah, thank you very much. Unfortunately, the line is breaking up a little bit, and we have to cut that interview short. Thank you for joining us and giving us that little update. Of course, I can confirm that the health department here in South Africa say that the test results of the patient that was admitted to the Charlotte Maxeke Johannesburg Academic Hospital show that he is free of the Ebola virus. Further tests are being carried out on the patient to check for other. This is a patient that has travelled from Liberia into South Africa at the weekend. So there's no need for us to panic about this. Now, Gauteng and other parts of the country have experienced some thunder showers over the weekend. Completely out of order. At the same time, various conditions led to dry weather, conducive to veld fires over the Eastern and Western Cape in the winter. Paul Minari is here to give us a little heads up as to what's happening. Paul always says to me, it's not the end of the world, this is normal.
No, yeah, it's definitely not.
Tell us about, firstly, let's start on the Highveld, because normally when it rains, it sort of brings the end of the winter, and we were quite excited at my house because we thought, oh, summer's coming early. Summer's not coming early then, is it? Is there more cold weather on the way?
Yeah, there is unfortunately more cold weather on the way. But you were right, on the Highveld, usually when you're experiencing these thunderstorms, it's actually a good sign that spring is on the way, because we notice that seasons are changing, because now hot air is coming in, and the ground is getting heated a lot, and that's what's leading to convection sort of rainfall that we're receiving. But at the moment, there's also cold fronts are coming in, so those could be the reason for all these rainy conditions. So that's pretty much the reason for that.
We're running pictures of veld fires now, Paul, and that was the one warning that was issued this week, was that there were veld fire warnings over the Karoo and southern parts of the Eastern Cape and Western Cape. Just tell us about these warnings, because my understanding is that it should be normally very wet in that part of the world this time of year.
Correct, yeah. But you must remember now, we are in August now, so we are moving towards that transition where the wet conditions are going away in the Western Cape as well as over the Eastern Cape province. So during this time, we get what we call berg winds, and we get these onshore winds coming in, and they get into on land. And when that happens, they sort of keep the moisture away and they keep it dry. And, with the heat conditions that we sort of experience as well ahead of cold fronts and all of that, that's actually warming up the surface. And because of the windy conditions as well, I mean, oxygen, wind, and with hot and dry conditions, that will lead to veld fire.
So what's the message then that we send to people, especially people traveling into those kinds of areas? Because it's so easy to flick a cigarette butt out and throw a bottle out, but these are very dangerous things to do for the locals there.
Yes, you'll see with a lot of disaster management departments as well, they're always encouraging people not to litter in that sense, with cigarette butts and normal bottles, because you know what happens with the bottles and the reflection of the sun. They can actually spark a light, and then actually can lead to these veld fires. And also with braais and so on, a small spark can actually fly long distances and actually catch onto a dry grass. And a lot of our grass is also pyrophytic, which means they actually need fire to grow even further. So, these will sort of lead to more veld fire. So we need to be very careful.
So just in conclusion, for people to not be hysterical about it, it's part of veld fire season then in that part of the world, and this happens every year, and we shouldn't over-report it as we've done the last couple of days.
Very well, yes. No, it's not a matter of over-reporting. Everything in a disaster sort of sense like that, when it's a warning, we should report about that, and you should let people know and make them aware. But we must remember, it is the season. Thunderstorms are on their way. Dry conditions are also coming in. These berg winds conditions are coming in, and veld fires are going to be more prominent. What we must remember is now, it's still mid-August. Usually these coming in the first 2 weeks of September, but now it's quite earlier now.
So this is in conclusion, I wanted you to tell us, are we going to see summer a little bit earlier, or is it just going to be spring a little bit earlier? And we still got to brace ourselves for the cold week, or an odd cold week along the way.
Exactly. That's the thing with climate change, is that a lot of things cannot really be predicted. We're predicting floodings and heavy rainfall in certain areas, but we're not really sure where those are. But yes, this is what we need to look out for now in the future. Winter can become a little bit shorter or even warmer. Spring can actually be shortened in half. As you remember, last season we had spring for a very short period, and then it became hot. Immediately, from the middle of September, it became hot, and it was almost as if it was spring. So these are variations that we need to prepare ourselves for. And
what kind of advice do you give to to the nation right now? How do you get your head around these kinds of conditions?
Okay, one of the major things that we must remember is we need to cut our carbon footprint, which is what leading to global climate change. At a bigger scale, this is what's causing all of these scenarios. But an advice would be, always do not pack away your clothes too soon, because the cold weather will still be coming. I mean, 2 cold fronts are passing by. And just do not litter in that sense of cigarette butts and water bottles.
Be conscious. Thank you, Paul. That's all we ask. Be conscious, be aware, and think of others, and think how you affect your environment, because you don't live in it on your own. We all share this space together. Paul Manare, our meteorologist, the handsomest weatherman on TV. Thank you for joining us this morning. Do we take a final look at what's happening on social media? Let's just take a quick look and see what you're talking about on social media. We're talking about Ferguson. Yeah, hard to believe police versions of events when they consistently harass, corral, attack and tear gas. Media, Richard Estes, that is the violence going on in America. Amnesty International has been kicked out of Ferguson by the police. Amnesty International, says Amanda Reid. Shorty Doo-Wop says they're firing rubber bullets. Hashtag Ferguson sounds rather familiar. Well, those are just some of the views coming in around this, again, another race violence incident in America. But that's where we wrap it today. Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show repeats at 2 in the afternoon with a total rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following day. We also stream live on YouTube at that time, with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel all of the time. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.